Right, good morning everyone. Thanks for coming along. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Alan Jones. Anyone else? Everyone else is here. So no other apologies. Right, move quickly on then to declarations of interest. Gareth, do you want to come in at this point?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I've given advice to members, and there is an item on the agenda, which is number 7, regarding the sixth form capital costs and contract award. So my advice to the members, you have a personal interest if you were a council-appointed governor of a comprehensive school in Torfaen, and I understand that the following members are council-appointed governors. And so if I can start with Councillor Richard Clark and Councillor Veronica Crick, governors of Crosskeeler Comprehensive School. If I can ask both members to confirm. Thank you. And Councillor David Daniels and Councillor Mandy Owen, governors of Cwmbran High School. Thank you. You will also have an interest if you are a governor which is not council appointed of a school or a comprehensive school, or have a close personal associate who attends or works at school. Now I understand that Councillor Cross has a prejudicial interest as her nieces attend Cwmbran High School. So Councillor Cross will leave the chamber when this item is being discussed. If I could ask Councillor Cross to confirm that interest. Thank you. And finally then, with regard to agenda item number 10, which is the Public Spaces Protection Order, there are a number of bodies who have been consulted, and those are listed in paragraph 6.2 of the report, which is page 141 of the agenda. My advice is that you will have a personal interest as a consultee if you have been involved with any of those bodies, but I understand that there are no interests of this nature. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, we're all happy to proceed on that basis. We move on to item number 4 then. That's the confirmation of the Cabinet minutes from the 5th of June. They're from page 3 on our agendas. Just go through for your accuracy on any matters arising on page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8, and the Welsh language version from page 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Is everyone happy to agree those as a true and accurate record? That's great. Move on to item number 5 then. The updates on actions. There's no outstanding actions, so we're very happy to move on to item 6. Is the financial and service planning reports. If I can introduce before handing over to Nigel, this is obviously one of the reports through the year as we look to focus on the financial challenge facing the authority over the next 4 years. The key messages in section 3 are quite clear that there's a challenge of at least £25 million if the current approach to funding local services continues and the expected pressures on the services come true. The proposals sort of outlined in the report are how we're going to try and work towards both a balanced budget for 2019-2020 and to face up to the challenges that face us in the coming years. So at that point, if I hand over to Nigel to take us through the reports, and then we can have a period of discussion and questions. So, Nigel.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, as Anthony has outlined, I mean, this is really the first actual report coming before Cabinet in relation to financial planning for 1920 and beyond, but it's largely based on the PDF that we had in April and the following member seminar that followed up in May. I mean, in terms of the financial challenge, I mean, that should be familiar to all of Cabinet. 25 million over 4 years. That's inclusive of schools, inclusive of estimating grant cessation and demand and inflationary pressures, and we've then broken it down across those headings. In 4.4, it's clear the assumptions on which it's based. Most pertinent there is around staff pay. The prior period of balancing our budgets have largely been characterised by the pay freeze that was introduced, and obviously now with pay awards coming in, it just makes the challenge significantly larger, because obviously we're a larger employer. I've given the figures there in terms of what's built in for the MTFP assumption, which assumes that Welsh Government are going to reduce our grant by -1%. That's the latest figures that we had as the conclusion of last budget from the Finance Secretary. I have made the point that there's obviously been a lot of noise at the UK level about extra money for health, and obviously there'll be a significant Barnett consequential arising from that. And I'm sure Welsh Government will be, I'm sure local government, the Welsh Local Government Association, will be making the case that some of that should fall down to local government, and in particularly social care services, which are so important to the National Health Service anyway. And the rest of that section talks about the demand pressure that we built in, working with service chief officers, and makes the point that decisions on council tax have yet to be made, and therefore we've just modelled it on the increase from the budget preceding the one that we've just concluded. But in terms of meeting the challenge, I largely start with schools and refer to the fact that we should have a policy steer around schools at an early stage, and the policy steer outlined in the report is that we shouldn't be asking schools for any percentage reduction off their 2018-19 budget, and we should be suggesting that any increase in pupil numbers that they experience should be funded through our budget. So as I conclude in 5.2, I think those at the moment put the schools in the overall school budget, as opposed to the individual schools, in a cash positive position, as opposed to what I'm estimating for the council, which is a cash negative position. I would also say that's quite early in the cycle to be coming out with those kind of commitments, which I would have thought would put the authority in a good position. Then refer to hypothecated grants and the fact that we've got to do those on a grant-by-grant basis, but we should be really looking to the point that we can either survive without the grant by ending the services, or we provide those services in a different way or through different routes. And then in terms of demand, and that's about working with demand management and early intervention to try and mitigate those. So the table then in 5.5 really takes members through those changes. And the impact takes away the impact around schools, so it gives the rest of the council, a challenge of £11.5 million. And then in 5.6, I start to articulate how we can make that manageable, because £11 million is a big chunk of money, and I try to make it manageable then. So I'm suggesting we'll ask every service for 1 or 2%. The 1 or 2% will depend on whether you're in the priority areas or not in the priority areas. And that's not a percentage reduction and absorbing pressures like it used to be. It's simply a percentage reduction. So therefore, all services can look at the pressures that they're building in to the MTFP and take away some of those pressures as a way of achieving the 1%. It's a way of challenging the actual MTFP assumptions as well. And then in terms of challenging the rest of the base budget, either on an efficiency basis, so therefore you're talking customer digital procurement, income streams, making sure we try and do things one way. It's not the first time I've said that, but I do think there's, as a council, as all councils, we always find a way to perhaps, I was unique in my area, we can't do it quite like that, and I think as it bites, we've got to move away from that. And then base challenge policy, we're going to have to start reducing some service levels or stop providing some things, but in accordance with your priorities. So then in the table in 5.8, I've tried to put that into some kind of, set some kind of targets or some financial parameters, and again, to make it manageable. So if I just go through the 2019-20 column there in 5.8, the challenge we've got for the authority is around 3.8 million. Looking at the council tax and council tax base may give us some resource. I mean, house building and houses, springing up, do increase the buoyancy of the tax base. The 1 or 2% reduction should give us 1.2 million, and then I've split the rest, £1 million out of efficiency and £1 million out of sort of challenging the policy, and so on every year. Now those things will be interchangeable, they'll cross across, but it does provide a bit of a frame and a bit of a sort of financial plan. 6 then says some further considerations. At the end of the day, I am the Treasurer. I have to have a fallback. We have to set a balanced budget. Whatever happens, so I will be asking services what would a further 3% be in relation to reductions off their service. So if you're in the 2% zone, that's 5%. If you're in the 1% zone, that's 4%. But I want those to be a fallback in case that we don't achieve in the original plan. But something invariably comes out of those things that is workable anyway. In 6.3, I just talk about the where we are in the current financial year very briefly. Q1 is when we'll report fully, but we're still experiencing the pressures in children's and turbine training, which were part of 2017-18 outturn. But we're working through those, and I haven't changed the forecast for those at the moment. There's then a timeline which requires a lot of progress this side of Christmas. We really need to be in a place by Christmas that we know where we're going, and ideally we want to be in a place where, if the settlement is better than -1, you're in a position as members of investing that, as opposed to plugging a gap because we haven't addressed it. I think that's important. A little bit on risks, and then referring back to service planning, because we are linking financial planning and service planning together this year far more closely than we have ever done before. I make the point at the end that we haven't done a well-being assessment because at the end of the day this is a set of targets and work streams. The well-being assessment will come on whatever we do within those work streams. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Nigel. I think it's good that we have that framework and that plan to work from. I think those processes are ever more vital the tougher it gets. And I note the point that you make about the need for progress, so that we're not panicking and doing everything at the last minute. As you say, if things turn out better than expected, that then gives us some scope to look at where we can invest, as opposed to, just say, trying to plug the gap. I think it's important at the outset to say that this is a situation that's facing all councils. This isn't a Torvine situation. This is a situation facing councils across the UK, and it is worse in England, but it's still a big challenge for Welsh councils as we enter the 8th or 9th year of this now. There's very few easy choices to make. I note that another council in England this week has raised concerns that it won't be able to provide statutory services, and that's the bleak situation that's facing councils. So I think it's right that we plan properly, we leave no stone unturned, and we continue to look at everything we can to address the entirety of our spend, and not just the 3% or whatever, and that's why it's important to have this plan. I think in a way as local government we're sometimes victims of our own success, and there's a bit of a presumption perhaps amongst national politicians, perhaps amongst sections of the public, that we can keep going on forever maintaining services with less and less funding. I think sooner or later, unless the UK government changes its funding position, then a breaking point will be reached. And I think it's important that we note that as we look through these savings, that you can't go on expecting local services to keep making savings like this without really severe consequences. I think that you're starting to see across the border in England about the very fabric of some of the important services that people rely on, like social care. I'm glad you mentioned the Barnett consequentials. We don't know what those will be yet, of course, because there's been an alarming lack of detail coming up from the UK government about this, and about other things actually, but I won't mention that at the moment. As we start to see more detail, though, I think it's vital that we continue to press the case that we have pressed at WLJ conference over the last couple of weeks about the need to spend that money on the healthcare sector and not just the health service. Local government provides vital preventative and early intervention services for people to stop them becoming ill, to help them lead more independent lives, healthier lives, and it's vital that we invest in those services and not just the NHS, so that we have a proper health service keeping people well and not just treating illness. I think that's key. I think if the Welsh Government can work with us on that, I think we can show the difference in outcomes that will achieve. I think we can show that we will invest that money in social care. It's over £2 million we invested in social care in the last budget, despite having to make cuts. So it's not like if we get extra money as local government, we won't put it into where it's really needed, because I think we will. We've got very good at that in the last few years, I think, too. A point I think about schools as well is important. Obviously things aren't easy for governing bodies for schools, because we don't live in the land of milk and honey. But I think it's important to make that point that even though we're in a cash negative situation, we're doing our best to save schools from having to make cash savings. They will be in a cash positive situation. I think it's a good thing for schools that we're outlining that early in the process, so they can start to plan. So that's not me saying that it's going to be easy for schools. I wish I could be in a position where we could make it easy for schools and we could fund the entirety of their pressures, but we're doing what we can as a council, and I don't think we can do much more on that. I'd just like to end by a thought about our staff and the impact of all this on them. I think they've had to face a lot of uncertainty in recent years, on top of the inevitable strain of having fewer and fewer people to do more and more work as demand rises and resources decline. And I think we do have to think as responsible employers about the impact of that on our staff, because if we're not careful, that will too start becoming more and more of an issue. So I think we have to see how we can work with our staff, how we can perhaps sometimes stop as politicians our sort of innate sort of instinct to try and keep doing everything. I think that places more and more pressure on staff to try and sort of cover the gaps that are left by having fewer people. So I think as a responsible employer we need to work with our staff, to work with the unions, to try and face up to the challenges that the declining resources bring, and I hope we can continue to do that as a council. But I'd just like to end by thanking Nigel, Dave Lilly and the team who work on it, because I think the one thing that we do have that's extremely important even in the toughest of times is thorough financial procedures and a corporate approach to dealing with the savings that we have to make that really stand us in as good a stead as could be stood in these circumstances. So thank you. Anyone else want to come in at this point before we move to the recommendations? Okay. So the recommendation then is on page 23. It's recommended that the Cabinet note the report and endorse the approach outlined. A show of hands in favour? Right, thank you. So we move on to the next report then, which is 21st Century Schools, Sixth Form Capital Costs and Contract Award. Just wait for John Chapman to assume the seat and then hand over to Cabinet Member David Yole.
Beg pardon. Can you all hear me now? Can everybody in the auditorium hear me? That's the important thing. John, I was about to say that I don't intend to usurp your report in any material way or significant way, but I think it is important to say a few words by way of introduction. Costs, as you're all aware, because the AGS has picked up on it as well, costs have increased due to, in the main, site-specific issues. For example, flood mitigation measures that I'm reliably informed have been somewhat unnecessary in the extent. Issues that we weren't aware of at the time and the pressures that we were under to perform certain functions in this respect and regard proved with hindsight not to be that necessary, but did incur increased costs nevertheless. The bill size and cost also was an issue that incurred extra cost, and certainly whole site development of the site in Cwmbran was a contributor to the extra cost. I want to put it on record here now that none of this increased cost, because I have heard one or two whispers that some people believe that the increased cost is down to ignorance, ineptitude or whatever of officers. That certainly isn't the case, far from it. In fact, the costs could have been far greater than they were if it weren't for the diligent and pretty sharp action of the officers involved. And the way that they've contributed to keeping the cost down, although the cost has inflated over and above, is by reducing the bill size. There was an issue with a part of the building that was expected to be, in the first instance, far bigger than was absolutely necessary. That's now no longer the case, and all parties to this has agreed on that. Reducing the building cost, and indeed reducing construction contingency. Some of you are probably aware that in every big project there has to be some kind of contingency fund built into this for contingencies. That's why it's called a contingency fund. And the contingency fund in this case was drilled down and found not to be necessary in terms of the original amount. So savings were made there as well. And all in all, whilst nevertheless there is still a gap in the funding, that gap could have been significantly wider had it not been for the action of officers in this respect. Nevertheless, it leaves a gap of some £4.686 million, £4,686,000, which will be contributed to in terms of relieving that cost by TCBC at £1.343 million, Colleague Gwent by £1 million, and the Welsh Assembly Government by £2.343 million. Absolutely necessary. The risks, if we don't go forward with this, is that we won't be able to award a contract to the approved developers or contractors, and in that case the job doesn't get done, with the knock-on and attendant features in terms of risk that incurs. I must say that, notwithstanding the extra cost, and it's timely that this particular report follows on from the report by Nigel Aurelius and the leader earlier on, celebrating in effect, and quite rightly so, the way in which we as a council and the finance department particularly has husbanded our resources in a way that puts us in a healthier position than lots maybe, and the extra cost to Torby and Canterbury Council has to be seen in that context as well. But notwithstanding the extra cost, I think the project still remains a first-class, excellent value for money project, and indeed in terms of moving forward, it represents a fantastic investment for the future, not just in terms of the education of our pupils, so there's a social cost, but in financial terms as well, because where the building is, it's situated right in the middle of a commercial hub in Cwmbran, and it can only benefit from and indeed enhance that commercial hub as well. So we can ill afford not to act swiftly on this. And what I'm suggesting is that, and I'm hoping is, and I'm commending this particular report to the rest of the Cabinet, and I hope they pick up the cudgel and vote accordingly and positively, because we hope that if we get this past Cabinet this morning and subsequently through the full Council in due course, then we can indeed start the work on the site in earnest as soon as possible. So I commend this report to you, and with that, unless anybody has any questions for me, I'll hand it over to John Tesh. John.
Well, thanks, Councillor Yule. And despite your opening comment, I think you've eloquently articulated all of the issues in the report. So I don't intend to go through them any further unless people have got particular questions. Just 2 points that perhaps are worth making. Firstly, what we're asking today is for your support for both aspects of this, the increased capital contribution and the award of contract which follows the first. The increased capital contribution has to go to Council, but the contract award issue doesn't. So when this report appears again in a week or so's time, you'll see that the contract award issue has been split out. The only other thing to say really is that we are where we are today. In part, it's a function of how we go about bidding for these schemes and the fact that you have to advance a proposal before you've had an opportunity to fully explore and survey the site. In this case, you'll see from the sums that were included, particularly in the appendix, that the cost pressures are by and large a result of abnormal site conditions, which you can't necessarily foresee, and you certainly can't bid for up front. So I'd like to assure you really that this isn't a project that's run away with us, but it is a project that's been hit by some significant site issues which couldn't have been foreseen.
Okay, thank you, John. I think thank David and John for the way they've introduced this report. One thing I think that's worth sort of mentioning is the distinction between capital and revenue funding that's sometimes not fully understood. Obviously, this is a one-off capital cost, as opposed to some of the revenue savings that we've been talking about earlier this morning. And I think it's right that we invest fully in an excellent and equitable solution for young people going forward. It's, as David said, it's an investment in their future, and one I fully support. Anyone else want to come in at this point before we move to the recommendations? Okay, the recommendations then are on page 29. That Cabinet agreed to increase the cost envelope for Band A of the 21st Century Schools programme by £4,686,000, requiring a further capital contribution from the Council of £1,343,000 towards the additional cost of the new Sixth Form Centre. And secondly, award the contract of the construction phase of the new Sixth Form Centre Cwmbran to the previously appointed main contractor in the sum of £22,098,872, which is within the revised project funding parameters and will be subject to obtaining full planning approval. On those two recommendations, can I see a show of hands? That's carried. Thank you very much. Next then, we move on to the report on the solar farm at Teacoke. Just wait for Fiona to get back into the room before I hand over to her.
Thank you, Leader. So, the report in front of you, the Council over a number of years has progressed several renewable energy projects with a mixture of technologies. We are currently generating 220 kilowatt hours of electricity and 254 kilowatts of energy heat. As part of our commitment to reduce the impact we have on climate change and develop renewable technologies, the Council has been carrying out investigations for potential development of renewable energy generation within the County Borough. This work has highlighted a preferred potential site at Teacoke for a solar farm which has an opportunity to develop up to 5 megawatts, although a preferred option for a 3.85 megawatt farm is put forward. Other sites were identified, as you'll find in the business case attached to this report. On the 28th of September 2017, the Welsh Government set out new targets for Wales of providing 70% of electricity from local renewable sources by 2030, and is consulting on having a carbon-neutral public sector with the same energy timescales. This is a positive direction and encourages more renewable energy. A solar farm of this size would offset the equivalent electricity needed to power over 1,000 homes in Torfaen, or about 24% of the Council's total electricity consumption, so this is a significant contribution. The Teacoke project has the potential to provide a long-term income to the Council and deliver a number of benefits for carbon reduction by making a positive contribution to national and local renewable energy generation and carbon reduction targets. It could also provide a localised economic activity and long-term productive use of a site that would be otherwise difficult to develop, being that it's a former landfill site. The report was taken to Clean Air Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee as well, outlining the opportunity, and members were broadly in support of the development and the use of the land. Some concerns about the financial aspect about forecasting were highlighted, so sensitivity testing of the forecast model will be carried out to address this concern. As always, scrutiny's feedback is valued and appreciated and listened to. Although the business case projections are considered prudent, the building of the solar farm on a capped landfill site, Teacote, will present some challenges, and those risks are outlined in 8.2. So until some of those risks are, until the project has been market tested by undertaking procurement, the risk remains that final construction costs will exceed the projected costs included in the business case. In addition, there are significant elements of the equipment that will be supplied from outside the UK, so until contracts are signed, the project will be exposed to volatility of foreign exchange market fluctuations. So this needs to be tested, essentially. So in conclusion, this is in line with the Council's renewable strategy. A number of renewable technologies are already in place, providing energy generation for the Council, which I think is incredibly positive. And this obviously adds to that. This is an opportunity to develop our aspirations further in line with Welsh Government legislation. Finally, I'd like to thank officers for their efforts. I'm pleased to see the Council is moving forward with a project that could potentially create a significant renewable energy source. Thank you. I'll pass it over to Rachel.
Thank you. I think the strategic side has been more than covered. I think in terms of what this report is asking today, I think it's important for Cabinet to understand this is an outline business case. We are not seeking to agree the capital expenditure or the profiles in terms of the revenue return. That would be subject to a final business case, which would come back to Cabinet when we have undertaken the procurement, have sought planning application, and we're ready to sign on the dotted line if it proves to be a viable proposition for the Council. The important thing for Council for Cabinet to also understand is that this report requests the approval of a drawdown from the Neighbourhoods Reserve of 112,000 to allow us to progress this project. So it is funding at risk, which if we then know if the final business case gets approved, we'll then sort of like capitalise that expenditure to bring it back into the departmental reserve. We will try not to spend that much, so we keep that at-risk spending and reduced. But there is core things we need to do, such as to get particularly planning advice and sort of like taking us to a stage of planning application. Planning colleagues will help us, but it's getting us ready for planning application. It is to do the liaison and the contracting with suppliers. We have been using local partnerships, free of charge, funded from Welsh Government, but their contract is changing, so we are going to need to bring in some commercial and legal advice to make sure that we do procure through the OBC process a sound and solid business model. I think, in terms of the why are we doing this, it is about the environmental. There is a potential revenue stream to the authority. Solar farms are becoming the norm. It will be our first venture into this, and if we are successful in this, we have other sites where we will be able to take this model in the future. So, with a bit of it is invest to save, hopefully, but we are spending at risk at the moment. In terms of any technical questions, we do have our energy expert in the room, but I would have to defer to his knowledge. But if there's any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
Thinking about this and the comments about the fact that we're using a brownfield site, which is actually one where we have used as landfill in the past. Are there any other examples of landfill being used for this purpose at all? I just wonder.
On this. Across the UK, yes, there are other landfill sites used, and the difficulty with a landfill site is we've recently conducted some outline geophysical exploration, and that would decide on the method that we would use to anchor panels on the site. Until we get the results of that, we can't obviously add that into the business case. So Cardiff Council, for example, on the same track as us, and they're obviously looking to do one on Lambie Way, which is way in excess of what we are proposing. So there are, across Wales, Wrexham, I believe, have done one as well on that basis. So we see it as an opportunity for use of landfill sites that have not been able to go on to be marketed as industrial sites.
Thank you. It seems an excellent way of using that type of land, and if it can be done, and if you've got the security that you're talking about, that's great.
Well, I think this is potentially a really good way of generating renewable, carbon-free energy and providing a revenue stream to the council. So this seems like if it adds up, then it's a good thing. What work's been done? Obviously, the site has neighbours with the canal and other things to make sure they're brought on board and taken with us in this.
We have engaged with the canal, and they do have aspirations for Teacock as well, and that's why they're in the report in the outline business case there are different options modelled with regards to the size of the solar farm. The site potentially could go up to 5 megawatts. The reason we are not taking it to that level is to be sympathetic to the canal and their aspirations, and a scheme potentially being complementary with them both. The canal's ideal would be for us to go to the smaller one and just be on the landfill site only, and so go down to about 2 megawatt site, not the 3.85, which at the moment is the preferred option. What we've agreed with the canal is that we're going to continue talking to each other. They're progressing their plans, we're progressing ours, because there is some complementarity between the two as well, in terms of their aspirations for a visitor centre, about the old heritage which could be powered by the new industrial sort of like energy sources. So the dialogue is ongoing. They obviously, if there are any concerns, that if we get to planning process and we are going for the bigger site, we will be talking to them. In terms of the wider businesses, that we will be connecting into the grid. That is the best economic model. We did look at sort of like, local supply, but there is the economic return will come from us supplying the grid. So that's the engagement that's been done to date.
That's great. Any more points before we move to the recommendations? Page 46 at 12.1. It's recommended that Cabinet support the business case outlined in this report and approve the progression of the project to its next phase of development, to include A, the preparation and submission of a planning application, B, the procurement of a design and build contractor and an operation and maintenance contractor, C, the development of the outlined business case to a full business case, and D, the approval of a budget for the above of £112,000 from Neighbourhood Services reserves, which will be capitalised when the project is approved. Can I have a show of hands in favour? That's passed. Thank you very much for your input. Move then on to agenda item 9, which is the Monmouthshire and Brecon Canal Adventure Triangle. I hand over to Fiona to introduce this.
Thank you, Leader. This is a great example of partnership working with a number of organisations. The Adventure Triangle project will be delivered in partnership, consisting of Torfaen County Borough Council as the lead authority, Caerphilly County Borough Council, the Canal and River Trust, and the Monmouthshire Brecon and Abergavenny Canals Trust. A package of funding has been secured to cover the full cost, including 1.4 million Welsh Government targeted match funding and 2 million in European Regional Development Funds. 2.1 million of capital investment will take place between now and December 2020 in Torfaen, at Pontymoor Canal Basin, South Sebastopol Canal Basin, Five Locks Canal Basin, towpath improvements to Teacock, and improved adventure tourism routes across Mynydd Mine, linking Cwmcarn Forest, Blaen Bran and Green Meadow Farm. So very positive in terms of people getting active and being able to access areas of Torfaen and Caerphilly. During the last 3 years, officers from Caerphilly and Torfaen have collaborated to develop this project. The Canal Adventure Triangle project aims to develop outdoor recreation, tourism and leisure activities along the canal and in Torfaen and Caerphilly, and connecting upland areas, as I said, of Mynydd Mine. There's a map also pictured in 4.5, so you can work out the exact area that it's going to cover. A list of consultees are listed in the report, but are not exhaustive. So I would like to point out that Cymdaithas, Tumbalum have been consulted, Blaen Brown Community Woodland Group, Changing Gears, Mynydd Mine Commoners, and a range of others may express interest in being part of this project through our consultation, which is welcomed. As an avid runner and walker and ambassador for a more active lifestyle, I welcome the report. It has the potential to bring long-term and valued community improvements while encouraging tourism and an active lifestyle. I thank our officers for their diligence and patience in securing this project. Pass it on to Andrew.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cross has done an excellent job of running through the main parts of the report. Just to point out that this is one of Visit Wales' flagship projects that is currently being developed through its tourism strategy. So I think there's about 10 altogether around Wales, and there's 3 in South East Wales, and it's great that this area is one of those priorities. So really what it's about is looking at a number of different locations where tourism is developing or has been successful for a while, such as Cwmcarn Forest and Green Meadow Community Farm, and then how those can be linked together to do a more sort of holistic offer within this area that we are sort of thinking of as a triangle. Because I think there's more benefit then, so we could perhaps benefit from the great numbers that come to Cwmcarn, because the Ponty Moel Basin, for instance, would be linked to that. The other thing to point out, I think, is that it's a joint project, as Councillor Cross has mentioned, so there's a number of investment activities going on in Caerphilly area as well, so investment at Cwmcarn Forest with pods, camping pods, and a new adventure playground for children, and there's also investment in the canal at Risca, and so all these things will link together, and it's great, as you said, it's great that there's this partnership across boundary as well as local. Okay.
Any questions from Cabinet members?
Yeah.
David?
I take it for granted that I have that croaky kind of voice that isn't enhanced by the increased audibility, so I apologise. The South Sebastopol Canal Basin, canal side infrastructure to support the development of the village. Can you expand on that, because that's an intriguing proposition?
So, clearly members will be fully familiar with what's going on in South Sebastopol with the 1,200 houses, and that sort of is linked up to this village core concept as part of the development that straddles the canal. So the canal runs through the development, really. So what we were looking at is making the most of that canal basin there then by, through this project, funding some moorings and also creating a bridge to link the two sides of the development.
And when is this likely to occur?
Well, this, so there's a programme in place between now and December 2020 to develop all these various facilities. The exact timing of that, I couldn't tell you offhand, but I can come back to you if you like.
Well, it'd be good. The thing that interests me, and it's not a concern necessarily, but it would be good if all of this could be done in terms of the time capsule, if you like, this to continue on from or be subsumed under the South Sebastopol development in total, because it wouldn't be all that good for residents to have to complete one particular project. They're ensconced in the community of South Sebastopol, and then there is ongoing work that's likely to carry on and be a bit disruptive. So presumably the thinking is that the timing of this will be usefully an extension of what's going on there. So it will limit the disruption. This is the point I'm trying to make.
Yes, definitely agree, Councillor, and we will endeavour to do our best to ensure that the timing is appropriate and work closely with the developer there.
I note at 3.2 and 4.1 that this is partly funded by a £2 million ERDF grant, and at 4.1 it mentions that 10 projects across Wales are sharing in 27.7 million of ERDF grants. For people less familiar with acronyms, where does that money come from?
This is money from Europe. It's European money under the current European programme. And so it's all additional and external funding being brought into this authority.
It's good to see European funds being spent in this way while we can still take advantage of them. I only wish that was not necessarily as time limited as it appears to be.
Yeah. Well, one final question on that. I know it's a bit pedantic, but the total package, how is that being split? Is it being split in 10 equal lots, or is there some kind of order of priority in terms of size and scale of project? Would make no sense.
Yeah, it's rather more complicated because obviously, according to the needs that have been identified with the partners and communities, then the costs, is quite a large investment in Pontymoor Basin, for instance, but at 5 locks, to be able to attract private sector investment to develop the facility, we would require much less investment. So it's according to needs, I think it's horses for courses.
Great. So if the former Foreign Secretary wishes to have a trip to the membership in Brecon Canal to show him the benefits of European membership, I'd be more than happy to share a boat with him. And that's self-sacrifice of your head.
He wouldn't come back.
If I move on to recommendations then, at page 113, that the Cabinet approves officers to proceed with the design and delivery of the project activities, and have a show of hands in favour. Thank you. Well, thank you for your work on this. Right, we move on then to item number 10, the Public Spaces Protection Order 2018, review of dog controls in Torvine. Fiona.
Thank you, Leader. Me again. Okay, so they term PSPOs for short, Public Space Protection Orders. In June 2013, Torvine Council adopted 2 dog orders which applied throughout the authority's area. The introduction of the dog control orders created the offence of failing to remove dog faeces from a public area, as well as enabling the authority to restrict access to dogs in sensitive areas such as schools, recreational grounds, through criminal sanctions. I think it's important to note that this is in line with not just making sure that children are safe when they're playing on fields, but also our cleaner and greener agenda and corporate priority. Individuals who have control of a dog in breach of one of these orders can receive a fixed penalty notice, currently set at £100, or if persistent, offenders can be prosecuted for an offence. In October 2014, with the introduction of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act, local authorities no longer had this power to introduce dog control orders, and a new system of control was introduced, known as PSPOs, Public Space Protection Orders. As well as replacing the dog control order system, the Act also gives local authorities 3 years to replace any dog control orders with public space protection orders, hence why we're here. On 20th of October 2017, the authority's existing dog orders were automatically replaced by public space protection orders as dictated by the Act. These interim PSPOs remain in force for up to 3 years. However, the authority hope to change these areas currently subjected to restrictions as part of the new single consolidated PSPO to cover the period between 2018 and 2021. It's hoped that the new revised PSPO, if accepted by Cabinet today, will be more focused and refined. The outcome of the public consultation exercise has played a key role in shaping the scope of the new PSPO that will apply in Torvine over the next 3 years. Following the pre-consultation exercise with stakeholders, approximately 140 dog exclusion areas were identified, which represents a significant reduction from the current dog control orders, which number approximately at 250. Just prior to the launch of the public consultation exercise in November 2017, councils asked officers and myself to consider proposals for dogs on leads areas in the consultation, so this was also included. An extensive public consultation exercise was carried out, as listed in the report, in order to gauge opinion from stakeholders and all interested parties on the scope and extent of the new revised PSPOs. The main findings of the public consultation recommendations from Safer Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee have been included in this report and appendices for Cabinet members to consider. As with all questions that include an imposed restriction or a fine, this was a contentious issue and encouraged a healthy debate, which I welcomed. I thank all members of the public, councillors and stakeholders for their contributions. Some agreed, stating dog fouling is an unnecessary blight on our communities and we should do more, while others disagreed in favour of other methods of prevention. I think this report demonstrates that all views were taken into consideration and a carefully created balance was achieved. So in conclusion, the authority is acting responsibly in reviewing its current dog control offences, given the length of time since they were first approved, and a high number of dog exclusion areas. The proposed reduction in dog exclusion areas from 250 to 140 provide a better balance for the wider community between dog exclusion and control and areas where people can freely exercise their dogs, and is more practically enforceable. It strikes a balance between the two, whilst ensuring our cleaner and greener corporate priorities are actively supported. Pass it on to Dave.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Thank you, Leader. I would add to that just to confirm again that the consultation was a real genuine consultation, and obviously Councillor Cross has referred to the different views that we got in there, and just really wanted to point out to the Cabinet that as a result of consultation, changes were made to the order. I refer Cabinet to paragraph 8.3.9, which, as a result of consultation, amendments were made to dog exclusion areas. And obviously, as a result of scrutiny consultation, also some new dogs on leads areas were introduced around local authority-run cemeteries, which is paragraph 8.6.3, and that was an outcome from scrutiny as well. Other than that, Leader, happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Any questions or comments on this report? Veronica?
Reading this, I was very pleased to see that we are looking at it afresh. It's something that is very important. Now, I've sat on a number of cases in the past where the results of dogs not being on leads has been really tragic, for instances where other dogs have been attacked or other owners have been attacked, and then the impact, of course, on the owner themselves of the dog that may be running loose, and the problems that can incur. So yes, I welcome this, and I'm sure most residents will be extremely glad to see that it has been looked at again. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I just should add that I'm a big thank you to the officers for doing such a thorough consultation. I know that at times, as I'd said, it was contentious, so they managed this incredibly well, and I think have delivered a holistic approach.
If we can move then to the recommendations on page 152. The recommendations are that Cabinet A considers the revised Public Spaces Protection Order following public consultation and consideration by the Safer Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and B approves the adoption of the revised Public Spaces Protection Order as outlined in Appendix 2 that will commence on the 1st of December 2018 and remain in force for 3 years ending 30th of November 2021. Show of hands in favour? That's carried. Thank you, and that's the last agenda item, so thank you for attending this morning.